So I'm starting a cult in a demo in Fort Worth, and I get done, and a friend of mine is doing a cutting demo, and I'm real interested to see what he's doing, and I'd worked with him a lot, but hadn't seen him for a couple, 3 years or whatever, so I was interested to see his latest and greatest. And here this guy comes up to me and starts asking me questions, and I'm like, hey, don't bother me. I don't have time right now. I want to focus on something else. But the questions he was asking me kind of intrigued me at the same time. So basically the upshot is, it says, let's not talk now, but I want to get together maybe for dinner tonight or some other time. Okay, so we agreed on that, and then at the end of the day, we went to dinner. And he's got all these brain questions and horse brain questions and how do they work, and I'm going, hell, I don't know. I know the outside of the horse. I don't know how they're put together inside or how they function. Well, that's his deal, brain function. And so that's, I felt, was kind of one of the missing links in my deal, is not understand fair. And when he started talking, about all the scientific part of it, then it really started filling in some blanks and answering some questions that I've always kind of had. I was like, hey, this is too good. I got to go share this. We got to go share this. We can't just keep this between us. There's a lot of people that need what I just learned right here. The tools that I added to my toolbox, a lot of people need those tools. But that's where it started. But
that's where it started. Yeah, it's Martin's right. I kind of picked him out of the lineup. I had watched a lot of people working horses, and I knew the nervous system inside and out. I knew horses' nervous systems. I know brains. I spent my career studying brains, and so. But I noticed with Martin is that he was taking advantage and using the horse's nervous system to direct and get what he wanted, and other people weren't. They would hurry on to the next task, and so I think one of the first questions I asked him is, do you build in this dwell time?
You know what you're doing? Hell, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's working.
Do you build in this dwell time to allow that horse to assimilate and process this information in? And I think that intrigued him the most. And I talked to him about MRI studies where, spacing out the learning is what the brain needs to take this in. And then we learned, we started talking about all learning is based on dopamine, searching out knowledge and getting a reward for it. So dopamine is that neurochemical that impacts movement and reward, and that seems to make sense because you have to motivate and move to get. Mm-hmm. So what Martin would do is set up situations for the horse to solve, and it would appear that the horse would get a dopamine charge out of just following that pattern. And other people that I was watching seemed to be forcing these issues to happen versus allowing the horse to find them. And that may not have been so easy to appreciate from the stands, but I could see where the horse was in terms of their nervous system. And it was almost like you took a jigsaw puzzle and you open up the box and you had half the pieces. And then you bump into somebody who bought the same puzzle, but they got the other half of all the pieces. Mm-hmm. So it's super exciting to sit down and say, man, this whole thing's starting to come together and fit together. So I think that's that kind of sense that I got when we connected.
And that's what I was doing in the A-pen is getting a little bit of whatever chemical, adrenaline or whatever, bringing that excitement up in the horse, and then letting him stand. And you could the gears were just smoking. He was processing things so fast. And that's what I learned, is that time for him to process things. And the more excited he was, the longer we sit there. Not to where he fell asleep and totally lost interest, but to where he could process it however many times, replay that video twice or 10 times. When I felt like he was totally done watching the reruns, then we would set it up to make another move with the cow. And that was, to me, down the path. I won't say I had it nailed on the optimum learning, but I really felt like I was on the right path of the optimum learning for that horse.
We know that new learning is based on previous learning, so you have to have a scaffolding built so that you can hang new information on it. If your brain doesn't know how to fit something in, it just tosses it aside. That's why novices struggle so much, because they don't have that big scaffolding to hook things onto. So allowing the horse to process things, we know that they'll replay them. We know that humans will rerun over the same circuitry, learning that they've had before. And then, if given time and feeling safe, they'll be able to associate it to other things that they've learned. Now you build a scaffolding. So you end up eventually having a horse that may even be in situations they've never been in before, but they have enough wherewithal within them, enough options. Because you can create an A, B, C, D, E, F horse, and they do it in the circus all the time, that know how to do one task over and over rotely, and they almost robotically can go through that, and to the audience that looks like a really intelligent horse. But if you look at the dendritic connections, there aren't as many. I mean, there's just one highway that they can take versus all the feeder roads. So what happens when you take that horse out on a trail? What happens when you take them out of the arena? You know, they come apart because they don't really have a base of knowledge to have options. You haven't created a horse that's able to use its entire brain. And we've evolved. I mean, when Martin and I first met, our knowledge of the nervous system is constantly growing. So there are ideas now that make a lot of sense. One is that we used to think there's the sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and all this learning takes place when the horse is really, really calm. Well, to some extent that's true, because you don't want to be way up in the sympathetic nervous system, but sympathetic arousal is the best learning environment neuronally for the horse. What that means is that you have to have some arousal. You have to have, I don't want to call it anxiety, but there has to be a motivation to be able to search. And so you're not going to have the horse's attention without that sympathetic arousal. So you actually have to be in the sympathetic nervous system on a low level to stay focused. Too much anxiety and you lose them, and not enough and they fall asleep on you. So there's actually a window there that's optimal to work through. And I think what Martin was saying is that, you know, if you think my horse always has to be comfortable, well, the analogy would be the kid who's comfortable making paper airplanes and looking out the window and putting his head down on his desk, or the attention deficit kid that can't pay any attention, they're all over the place or really aroused. You have to have an optimal window. And so learning to get your horse comfortable and feel safe enough to stay there and keep, it's a constant art.